وبعد. Modesty and Hayaa is one of the branches of Islam. And the highest level of Hayaa and modesty is where somebody is able to be conscious of themselves in the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The way I walk, the way I talk, the way I dress. Sometimes we lose a sense of modesty when we're by ourselves. But Uthman radiallahu anhu was someone whose modesty was of such a high level that even when he was alone, he would make sure he was well presentable because he believed that the angels were around him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was always watching him. And Hayaa, as we learn from one hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says to the Sahaba, "Istahyu min Allahi haqq al-Hayaa." That learn to have Hayaa, especially in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala of the highest level. So the Sahaba, they said, this Hayaa, we understand what Hayaa means. Can you explain it? And then the Prophet ﷺ, Hayaa is something where it allows a person to feel shy in front of Allah to do certain things. When I want to look at someone, but I'm not supposed to, when I'm supposed to listen to something, but I'm not supposed to, that is a sense of Hayaa. But imagine that Hayaa in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just to give you an example, if I'm sitting here in the masjid, and I'm sitting in the corner and I'm scrolling through my phone, and let's say some ad or something pops up and a person walks by and he looks at it, and I notice that he sees what's on my phone, what is that sense of feeling that I'll have? There's a feeling of guilt. That's a feeling of shame that, oh no, when nobody was looking, I thought I could do it, but now somebody saw that I had something on my phone that I didn't even want, but it happened by accident. But that's a feeling of Hayaa. Now imagine carrying that feeling of awareness even when nobody is around. That is when you have Hayaa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A lot of times we let our guard down. Whether when we're going to the bathroom or we're at home, we're going to the bed, we're just walking around. We have this level of indecency. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, how was he described? He was described as someone who had so much Hayaa. How much Hayaa? The hadith actually describes, Aisha radiallahu anha says, that his Hayaa was so much that if you ever seen, and this is just an example, Aisha radiallahu anha gives this example. She said, if you ever seen someone who gets married on their first night, a person who gets married and they're speaking to the other family for the first time, you know how they're very collected, they have their gaze down, they're very mindful of what they say. Al-adhra, al-adhra, that's the word that she uses, that someone who just got married and they're in front of their family and they have this level of collectiveness, consciousness, awareness of what they say. They're very modest. They're not very loose because every person has like two sides to them. One side is when I'm by myself and the other side is when I'm in the public or I'm around family members who I meet the first time. Now, Aisha radiallahu anha says the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his quality was such that he was like a person who was just newlywed, that they're very collected, they're very controlled, they're very professional, but that was his life 24/7. That nobody would be able to say something in front of him except that the Prophet ﷺ, he would be very calm and collected and never lose control. In fact, when people used to come and ask questions, sometimes people would come ask questions about their private lives. And the Prophet ﷺ says, don't ever have Hayaa. Ask your questions. But you can even see on the face of the Prophet ﷺ, when they would ask about it, he wasn't relaxed. He was very calm. He was very professional. That when they would say, you know, this is the issue with my wife, this is the issue with my husband, this is happening, he had a lot of Hayaa. And that Hayaa wasn't once or twice, it was 24/7. So we need to figure out that in my life, that when I interact with people, do people see somebody who's very loud, who can't control their tongue, who's very loose with his language, who's very loose with his dressing? Or when I interact with a Muslim, I see someone who's very well put together, very selective of his choice of words, the way he dresses, the way he interacts. It's like someone who's very well-mannered and someone who's always acting as though somebody is around them. So that is the concept of Hayaa, not only in front of other people, but even in the absence of people. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us all Hayaa. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us decency. May Allah allow us to have this level of awareness even when there's nobody around.